Hey everybody, John here. I'm going to be bringing you the next installment of Adventures in Wrenching, which is part of Retired Renegade Adventures. Upgrades that are being done to my 89 Jeep YJ, which I keep beating up as I go out on these adventures. The last one did the brakes. Wasn't the best video because of the way that the light was, but now we're going to tackle the power brake booster and do a total upgrade. You can see here that it is definitely the old system, and we're going to be putting in, or at least I hope I am, and I'm going to have to do some modifications along the way, probably to this bar as well, the new dual diaphragm brake booster and a master cylinder. Areas that I can see that might have to be done is I may have to modify the intake, because this booster comes out so much further, and I don't know yet how far the master cylinder comes out. But not only does it not have good brakes, this noise you hear, which sounds like a wind tunnel, is my bad booster. So, totally shot. Since I had to replace it anyway, it's time to put the new one in. So it's a pretty straightforward process until I actually get it in, and then I have to do all the modifications. It's 110 degrees out. It's Arizona. I'm going to bring my umbrella over to this side, and we'll take some still photographs, and we'll get started. Okay, so far got the air intake hose off, got the cross brace off. One thing that I've noticed so far, and it confirms the suspicion, at least by what I read, is the older Jeeps had SAE or American measurements, and I'm afraid the new booster and all of the fittings are going to be metric, so I'm going to have to get some adapters. But I'm about to pull this off and see where we're at. There's not a lot of light, but up here there is one bolt. That is the push rod that goes to the plunger that goes to the power brake booster. It is a really tight fit in a Jeep, so you're going to have to figure out the best way to do this to get that off. I figured I'd go ahead and share this one difficult part. I didn't show you the rest of the bolts because, to be quite honest, if you haven't figured out how to pull off a bolt, which is pretty straightforward, there's nothing in the way on the ones on the outside, then you really probably shouldn't be doing anything with your brakes anyway. So I wanted to show this bolt, and I'm going to get this out of here, and then I should have the power brake booster off. So here we are. I'm going to take a little different path on this. The common swap out is to use a later model YJ version, like a 95, and everybody has already talked about how difficult those are to find. I tried one off of a TJ and looked at that, and that would have required the rod to be hacked and rewelded and everything. So I am actually going with a Chevy unit, and even though the drum is bigger and I may have to modify a couple of things as far as that goes, the important stuff is the same. Your measurements across from bolt to bolt are the same at 3 3/8. Rod length is the same at 7.5 inches. This is designed to stop a half-ton truck, so there should be plenty of stopping power. It is also of the same year. This is off of an 89 Chevy half-ton. I may get lucky and have the fittings actually be able to match up as being SAE to SAE, and we'll go from there. So I'll let you know. I think there's going to be less trouble converting this than there is with the Jeep unit. I will have to come up with a different brake light switch assembly, but that should be a fairly simple fix too. So let's get started. Okay, I will add that these bolts are considerably larger, so I'm going to have to drill out my bracket. What I will use though is I'm going to be using a tapered bit. That should take care of it and we'll be fine. Okay, first test fitting. I've already got the bracket taken care of. I do have one bolt in it. It is sitting where it's supposed to be. One potential issue, I guess I'll find out here in a second. We do know that the drum is a lot bigger on this, but as you look at it, I have to wonder if there's going to be hood clearance issues. So let's set this right here, and let's find out. So far, now I do have a lock on this, so that's keeping it from closing all the way yet. So give me a second. Okay. Closes perfect. I bet I haven't got a ½ inch of spare space in there. Okay. First problem, or first potential issue, not an issue. That's great news. Okay. The second thing that I can see is going to be probably a problem, and I'll have to modify that a little bit, is you've got these metal cross braces right here, the front radiator support struts. I can almost guarantee that is going to run into this. So give me a second and let's test it. Yep. As you can see, if I put it in the way that it's supposed to be in, which is that bar goes underneath, it is hitting right here. But there is a lot of play at the end of this, so we're going to go modify this real quick and fit this part of it. You can see the drilled out holes that I have there, which fit perfectly to the new power brake booster now. And I have adjusted the little frame rod here. There's 3 little bends, one right here, and now one right here, and this all lines up and it still bolts down, and there is room for the power brake booster now. It does not seem that, at least when I test fit it in there, and this is the old master cylinder, that we have any restrictions against the air box, but we'll discover that in a little while. Okay, a trip to the hardware store, a little extra research time, and about $5 worth of parts, and I think we're going to be set. The rod was different than the other rod, but this is the original rod bolt, and with a brass sleeve that actually fits in there perfect. So we should be able to get that to fit in there just fine. These bolts will line up just fine. As I said earlier, this was the original brake switch, which would fit here in an angle, and as you push the brake, it would rotate this and press this sleeve. That's not going to be able to happen, so I'm going to have to use an old school brake switch and come up with a bracket, but we'll discuss that in a little while. We're going to go get this back in and see if we can get it hooked up at least to the pedal. Here we have some new hardware for this project. I did go actually down to a hydraulic shop and have the new sections of brake lines made. That is my recommendation. It cost $25 for the 2 brake lines with the correct fittings, which they matched up to the old proportioning valve and the new master cylinder. And we're going to go ahead and install these. Now you can go down and you can get adapters and you can make your own, but
for the money and the time that you spend, and to have somebody with professional equipment do it, this was the way to go. Now, one of these two brackets will be used. I'm probably going to weld an L bracket to the steering column, and we'll talk about that, and that will house the simple brake switch, which will go on the pedal, and that'll be my solution for that. Plus 2 more nuts to bolt the master cylinder to the power brake booster. Now, the original ones were coiled, and what I use is something like that, and you just wrap it around, and I'll show you the finished product afterwards for making the spiral coil. But it's hard to coil and hold this at the same time, and I didn't bring my little tripod with me. So we'll go ahead and do these up real quick, and then I'll meet you outside. Okay, we have our next part of the process here. Another $20 in. I've got thread locker. It's thread locker blue, which means I'll be able to get it back off, but just a little extra to make sure that my fittings don't come loose from my power brake booster or my proportioning valve. Simple 2-wire switch. This is actually out of a 1976 Chevy pickup, and my longer vacuum line that'll go to my power brake booster from the manifold. Since the booster was bigger, my old one wouldn't work because it is too short. So we'll go start putting all this in. Here we are so far. It is mounted in place, the booster, master cylinder. The recently fabricated lines are in place and thread locked, thread locker blue on the proportioning valve up to this. So we're going to go ahead and put in some brake fluid so they get this to start bubbling up to the top. Clear out as much as we can, and then we're going to start working on bleeding and purging. I haven't put the hose on yet, but I'm going to do that in just a second for the vacuum. We're going to go ahead and pour in some fresh brake fluid here. Since this is an empty master cylinder, I'm going to have to purge it, and you're going to see bubbles coming up to the top for a couple of reasons. Is even though the proportioning valve is still full, there's air in the air in the master cylinder and air in these lines down here. So, but you can see it bubbling up right now. So it's going to take some time to percolate through. And I'm going to go ahead and start the engine, so it will cause some vibration and help that along before I start working on pumping the working on purging the brakes, bleeding the brakes. You can see how much air is still coming out. So this is gonna be the longest part of the process for this. But once it's done, we should have everything set up, and then all I'll have to do is fabricate the brake light switch, and then we'll be able to find out if this little project of ours worked. So we're going to keep pressing on. One bit of good news is it looks like there is going to be no binding restriction or anything else with the air inlet tube off the air box to the throttle body. So that's also good news. This is fitting very, very well. When I shut the hood the last time, it looked like the hood might actually be resting barely on top of the master cylinder. A way I could drop that by just a smidgen is pull these bolts, put a washer in behind these top two bolts between the bracket and the booster, and that will tilt this down just a little bit. Not enough to affect the rod, but enough to drop it down and maybe give me just that extra 1/4 inch of clearance. we'll see if I need to do that later. Okay, remember that jet engine noise that we heard earlier on when I first started this project? It's not there. Now, it is still all going to the floor, and I can pump it up, and I will have brakes, but I haven't bled them yet, so this is going to be one of the longest of the projects, because I've got to get underneath with a small wrench and a bleeder hose and a large bottle of brake fluid and go for it. But we're making progress. Okay, everything's in place. Now, I did not pull out my steering column to actually weld this. That's going to be my next step, but for the purpose of this video, I'm not going to do that. I've got it clamped securely in place, the bracket and the two-piece, or the two-wire switch, which you can see up here. Looks like it works out pretty good. The reason I'm not going to do this quite yet is because in the next few weeks, my plan is to actually pull this steering column out and replace it as well with a slightly different unit that doesn't have internal electrical problems. So I didn't want to weld on a bracket, then have to weld on a bracket again. This proves my point, and as you can see in the headlight of my Ford truck back here, brake on, brake off. So works good. Now we're gonna go throw this in the slot and go take a little longer test drive. I did take it out just in my little cul-de-sac here, but we're gonna go get it on the road and see how this actually works. Here we go. Let's see how this works out. So far so good. I was able to get out of my own driveway. That's a good start. Stops good, way better than it used to. Of course, it hardly used to stop at all, and I haven't even replaced the back brakes yet. I did do the front brakes. I have a video of that I haven't posted yet, but it's definitely so far so good. Best of all, no rushing noise. When I push on the brakes, doesn't sound like a jet engine. Alright, we're gonna cut into the neighborhood here up at the traffic light. It's pretty amazing how good this was compared, or is compared to what it was. Oh yeah, oh, amazing. World of difference. Okay, so definitely my experiment worked. It was probably easier than using the Jeep parts conversion with the 95. Quick rundown as I'm going through is the booster and the master cylinder were for a 1989, so I matched what this YJ is. Chevrolet half-ton pickup. The brake light switch is off of a 76
Chevrolet half-ton pickup. Just a little push-button two-prong. And the lines were made at a hydraulic shop, matched them up. All in all, I probably have 200, 220 in the entire conversion. Money well spent, well worth it. One more stop. Stops really good. I can't wait to find out what it's going to be like when I do the back brakes and put some good shoes on the back. Okay, well that's going to be it. So I'll wrap this up. Okay, this ends our most recent episode of Adventures in Wrenching. This is John. We'll go over a quick recap of what we did here on my 89 Jeep Wrangler, which was do a custom conversion to a better, newer, later model power brake booster, master cylinder. As I said, this is out of a GM unit. It does fit, barely, but I don't see any marks on top here, and I don't see any marks on the hood up here, but it is a really tight fit. Everything actually fits in. Did not have to do any modifications to the air intake, which is good. Did have to tweak this a little bit to get it out of the way, but it clears and it still locks down up front, so that's good. This is a dual diaphragm unit. It stops amazing now compared to the way that it did, but that's designed to stop a half-ton pickup, not a little Jeep. Biggest part of the modification was actually having to come up with a bracket and an older brake light switch, which is up there. Works fine. You can't see it, but the rod, which is the reason I went with this instead of the Jeep conversion that everybody talks about, is it is the correct length push rod that goes from the brake pedal into the booster. So didn't have to hack it, cut it, extend it, and all of the other things that were required if I went with a booster off of a 95 Jeep. So there you have it. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe. Check out my other videos on Retired Renegade Adventures, and we'll see you on the next adventure.